Imagine pulling off a real estate hustle so wildly successful that you swindle over £200,000 from elite British bankers, wealth that translates to billions in today's economy, and convince two full shiploads of ordinary families to sail off to a tropical paradise, only for 70% of them to be completely wiped out by disease, because their exotic dream home was actually just a barren, mosquito-infested wasteland. Brutal. Welcome to an era of pure, unadulterated financial madness. Welcome to London in the early 1820s, a society where citizens have way too much cash from the Industrial Revolution, absolutely zero corporate regulations, and a massive obsession with throwing money at things they can't even find on a map. This is the anatomy of the ultimate corporate illusion, terminal curiosity. Entry 17. Before we unpack the absolute train wreck that was the territory of Poyais, we have to examine the mastermind behind the entire circus. Meet Gregor MacGregor. Gregor was a Scottish military adventurer who had a mediocre, highly controversial career fighting in various revolutions across South America. He wasn't exactly a tactical genius. As a matter of fact, he fumbled his military operations so frequently that his own allies actively tried to court-martial him. But Gregor possessed a golden weapon, an endless supply of pure, unshakable audacity. So, in the year 1821, Gregor struts back into London wearing a gilded wardrobe covered in self-awarded medals, trailing an entourage of hired servants, and introducing himself as the Cazique of Poyais. Now, if you look up the terminology, Cazique basically translates to a prince, or an absolute sovereign ruler. And Poyais? Well, according to Gregor's grand descriptions, Poyais was a highly sophisticated, independent country nestled right in the heart of Central America's Black River region. Gregor begins dominating the most exclusive high society lounges, circulating an incredibly detailed 300-page guidebook that he definitely paid a ghostwriter to manufacture, and pitching his imaginary empire to anyone with a heavy wallet. He would stand before rooms of wealthy aristocrats and declare that Poyais was mathematically the greatest location on Earth, that the soil was so remarkably fertile you could harvest crops twice a year without even trying, and that the rivers were literally choked with pure gold nuggets just resting in the water waiting for collection. He told them the capital city, St. Joseph, featured a sprawling royal palace, paved stone boulevards, a state-of-the-art opera house, and a grand parliamentary building. And when a wealthy mark inevitably raised a hand and asked if the region was secure, Gregor would just scoff and fire back. Secure? The local tribes practically worship me. They begged me to assume absolute power. It's essentially Great Britain, but with tropical weather and zero income tax. And just like that, the elite investors would fold, crying out to take their money immediately. But whether the wealthy aristocracy believed every single syllable or not, it didn't even matter, because the public was aggressively infected with financial panic. You see, foreign colonies were declaring independence across the globe at this time. And British investors were utterly addicted to buying high-yield foreign government bonds, the exact same way modern internet nerds buy worthless digital tokens. Gregor observes this hype and notes, perfect, a market. So, Gregor establishes an official Poyaisian government legation right in the center of London. He doesn't just ask for casual handouts, he sets up a full corporate institutional apparatus. Gregor begins floating official Poyais national bonds on the London Stock Exchange. He partners with major highly respectable banking firms to legitimize the paperwork. And oh god, were they effective at marketing it? The financial sector goes completely hysterical. People are aggressively trading Poyais stock every single day, driving the valuation straight into the stratosphere. But Gregor wasn't satisfied with merely fleecing institutional bankers who had capital to lose. He decided it was time to harvest the middle class. He targeted hard-working Scottish and English citizens, school teachers, shoemakers, tailors, retired soldiers, and decided to expand his real estate portfolio by selling them physical land deeds. He would point at a person stitching boots for pennies and ask why they choose to freeze to death here in the British mud, when they could buy 100 acres of prime, fertile paradise in Poyais for a single month's savings. He would wave an official land certificate with an intricate gold stamp in their faces and promise them absolute prosperity. And when the excited settlers asked if they could establish a storefront there, Gregor would nod enthusiastically and tell them, absolutely. In fact, you should probably convert all your British currency into official Poyaisian banknotes right now before you board the ship, because our local currency has a much stronger exchange rate. And yes, you heard that correctly. Gregor literally walked into a local London print shop and manufactured thousands of beautifully engraved, entirely fictional banknotes for a country that did not exist. He was selling literal scrap paper in exchange for physical, heavy, British gold coins. He even started auctioning off high-ranking officer commissions in the non-existent Poyasian military. If you were a bored corporate clerk who wanted to feel powerful, you could pay Gregor a massive fee, and boom, you are now an official captain in the fictional Poyasian regiment of foot. Congratulations. You are now a military leader. The man was hoarding wealth. influence, and stacks of bullion like they were collectible game cards. And the British public, who spent their entire lives assuming official-looking bureaucracy was real, stared at this massive corporate setup and concluded, "This is the investment of the century." It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. In late 1822 and early 1823, the first two official emigrant vessels, the Honduras Packet and the Kennersley Castle, set sail from Great Britain. On board are roughly 250 hopeful human beings. We are talking about intact families, young children, professional doctors, clerks, and those newly appointed military officers proudly wearing their expensive, custom-tailored Poyasian uniforms. They spent months enduring the rough Atlantic crossing, clutching their fictional land certificates and counting their fake banknotes, dreaming about the golden streams and the beautiful architecture of the capital city, St. Joseph. Eventually, the ships drop anchor off the coast of the Western Caribbean. The passengers eagerly crowd the deck, rub their eyes, stare at the horizon, and suddenly, the grand empire of Poyais transforms into a psychological nightmare. There is no capital city. There are no paved boulevards. There is no state-of-the-art opera house, no grand parliament, and exactly 0 golden rivers. There is literally nothing, nothing at all, but an unbroken, ominous wall of thick, impenetrable tropical jungle, a barren shoreline, and a massive, welcoming committee of millions of starved mosquitoes. Welcome to the dream. The settlers would look at the captain in complete shock, asking where the grand port of St. Joseph was and where they could find the brick storefronts. And the captain would just shrug and tell them, "My friend, I just deposit you exactly where the coordinates dictate. This is the Black River. Good luck with your real estate portfolio." The settlers are completely paralyzed with disbelief. They assume there must be an administrative error. They think to themselves that perhaps the city is situated a few miles upstream, or that they simply dropped anchor on the wrong side of the peninsula. So, instead of immediately fleeing, they execute the classic, highly fatal error of establishing a temporary camp right on the wet sand. They unpack their luxury luggage, their grand pianos, and their fine porcelain directly onto the dirt. And then, the environment responds. A massive tropical storm slams into the coast, shredding their tents to ribbons and violently tearing their ships away from the anchorage out to sea. They are now completely marooned in the middle of a literal jungle with a rapidly rotting supply of food and absolutely zero communication with the outside world. This is the exact moment where occupying an empty swamp evolves into a brutal game of survival against nature. The tropical climate is suffocatingly humid. The local water supply becomes toxic almost immediately. Within a week, the human anatomy begins to fail. Frustrated, starving families are forced to wander into the thick mud, desperately trying to forage for calories while contracting horrific tropical infections. Morale doesn't just decline, it completely evaporates. People are collapsed in the dirt, burning up with yellow fever and malaria. The newly appointed military officers are literally sitting in the mud, watching their fancy uniforms decay off their frames, realizing their high-ranking titles are completely worthless. To make the scenario even more incredibly awkward, a local indigenous leader actually encounters their camp. The settlers sprint toward him, waving their official documents, begging to be directed to King Gregor's palace because they purchased this property legally from the supreme government. And the leader would just look at them and ask, "Who on earth is Gregor? Some random Scottish guy gave me a bottle of cheap liquor last year to sign a random piece of paper. This isn't a sovereign nation, you idiots. This is a swamp. You're going to die out here." And they did. Day after day, the mortality statistics begin to multiply. Children are weeping, parents are burying their family members in shallow graves right on the beach, and the entire expedition transforms into a literal mass grave. It's an absolute horror story, and easily one of the most spectacular fumbles in colonial history, truly starving outside someone else's non-existent house. Luckily, in April 1823, a passing official merchant ship from the British colony of British Honduras, modern-day Belize, spots the chaotic wreckage on the shoreline. The crew sails in, inspects the piles of rotting luxury luggage and the skeletal dying survivors. Wondering what in the world happened here, the rescue team executes an immediate evacuation. They gather the remaining survivors, haul them onto the decks, and sail them away to safety. Out of the 250 optimistic souls who departed Britain to claim their golden real estate, over two-thirds were completely scrapped from the timeline by disease and starvation. The survivors are physically broken, financially ruined, and deeply traumatized for the rest of their lives. So, with the entire conspiracy completely exposed and a rescue ship carrying dying victims back to Europe, you would assume that Gregor MacGregor was immediately hunted down by the military, dragged into a dark dungeon, and executed for mass murder and high-level fraud, right? No, not even close. because Gregor was a certified master professional. The absolute second Gregor discovered that the rescue vessels were returning to expose his crime. He didn't stick around to offer an apology. He packed up his giant chests of stolen British gold, abandoned his high society lifestyle, and fled straight across the English Channel to France. And guess what? The man had the absolute audacity to try to execute the exact same hustle all over again. He walks straight into the Parisian financial markets, establishes a brand new official Poyais legation, and begins printing a fresh batch of fake land certificates to sell to wealthy French investors. He even managed to convince a French transit firm to start preparing a third vessel full of French families. The man was collecting European gold like it was a repeatable video game objective. This time, however, the French bureaucratic system was slightly less gullible than the British. They observed a random Scottish veteran suddenly issuing official passports for a tropical empire they had never seen on any global map and concluded, "Hold on a second, this looks incredibly fraudulent." The French police promptly arrest Gregor and throw him into a Parisian prison cell on charges of massive financial deception. But Gregor deploys his final, most incredible trick: legal loopholes and pure verbal manipulation. During his high-profile trial, Gregor employs a brilliant team of expensive lawyers and basically argues that he wasn't a criminal. He was simply an optimistic real estate developer whose local management team fumbled the execution of the colony while he was away. He maintained that Poyais was a completely legitimate territory and that the settlers simply failed to cultivate it properly due to bad luck. And because international financial frameworks were basically non-existent in the 1820s, the French court actually acquits him. He walks out of the courtroom a completely free man. Absolute legendary plot armor. Eventually, in his final years, Gregor retreats to Venezuela, where he somehow convinces the government to award him a military pension based on his minor revolutionary actions decades prior. He lives out the rest of his timeline in ultimate comfort, relaxing in a beautiful tropical villa, consuming fine liquor, and dying peacefully of old age at 74. This is the bizarre, deeply tragic chronicle of the Grand Poyais land scam, a war of pure psychological deception that caused way too many unnecessary deaths, completely broke the London stock market, and proved that if you tell a lie big enough, people will literally pay you to destroy their own lives. If you want to ensure your financial real estate portfolio remains completely secure from modern con artists, drop your thoughts on Gregor's legendary plot armor in the comments below. Our next historical speedrun is already in production, and it makes this swamp look like a luxury vacation. Thanks for watching, and try not to buy any fictional empires before the next timeline.